everyone, and welcome back to Tuesday Talks with Saloni. Today we have with us Grandmaster Magesh. He's a celebrated chess player and a fantastic chess coach, and I'm so excited for all the conversation and areas of topics we're going to address today. Welcome, Grandmaster Magesh.
Hi, Saloni. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I think, so many people watching this will benefit a lot from your experiences and what it means to be a chess player of your caliber as a coach, and also your thoughts about mindset and how that underpins to chess.
Sure, I'll share whatever I have, and the hopes, like you said, is that people take the good things from it and use it.
Yeah. Okay, so let's get started. One thing that I'm most curious about is that you have seen chess from two perspectives. So one is your journey as a chess player, and then also as a coach, now when you look at it from the other side. How would you say your understanding of sports psychology or mindset training has changed, if at all, throughout this journey?
I think it changed quite a bit because when you're training
Hmm.
for yourself, there is a single-minded perspective, right?
Hmm.
I didn't really have to think about how something has to be done multiple ways or can be done multiple ways.
Hmm.
So it's always, okay, what is the problem and how do I solve it, right? It was very straightforward. I did that. Of course, every chess player, every sports person will come across psychological things that they have to deal with.
Yeah.
I remember when I was younger, I met a sports psychologist at some point, and I had some sessions, talked to them, and usually the sessions really help me, like in terms of just discussions and like kind of letting things out that you're
Yeah.
thinking about. So that was good. But when I started teaching, what I realized is that like I would usually implement the ideas and thoughts and things that work for me
Hmm.
as usually like the source of truth. So and very early I realized it's not how it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, so the biggest change for me is that you can make things work in multiple different ways, right?
Yeah.
You can come to that nice place in your head, but by doing different things, right?
Hmm.
It's like it doesn't have to be the same path, and it's sometimes very challenging to understand it because if particularly a path is completely the opposite of what you see,
Hmm.
it's sometimes hard to internalize as a coach. But over the years, you grow and you realize there is nothing. Everything is like flexible at this point.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
you're so right. I think psychology is so subjective. What works for one would probably not work for the other, or might exactly fit in one area for the other and be completely different in the other area. So the subjectiveness of it also makes it very unique, as are we, as is all, every chess player out there. But if I had to,
absolutely.
dive deeper just a little bit and ask, what are some areas that when, you as a chess player did work with a sports psychology consultant, as you mentioned? What were some of those areas that you think you benefited from?
I don't remember the specifics of it, but I
Hmm.
can definitely try to recollect some major areas. Like, I mean, I don't remember having anything unique. Like
Hmm.
most of the problems, as you are probably aware at this point, is like it's repetitive. It's we're all humans. We face similar problems. We face similar things.
Yeah.
Like for example, having to play high rated players sometimes, or sometimes facing this lack of confidence. Right? When you're going
Hmm.
through a phase where you're struggling. I remember that phase for sure, like struggling phase,
Hmm.
because I was doing really well when I was in junior years, and right around that time when I was graduating from high school, in the 2 or 3 years, I stagnated quite a bit,
Hmm.
and that had a psychological impact on me. So I remember talking about it and working through it. It did change the course of my life to some extent, I would say, also because depending on what you are there at that time, your career can change differently, right?
Yeah.
I did end up doing bachelor's and master's in computer science, and I came to US, so I kind of changed my career path, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, that was a phase I remember struggling with. Like when results don't come through,
Yeah.
confidence is shaken. So when I talk to my students and parents, I say that there's only two ways that I know
Hmm.
to gain confidence. One is with result,
Hmm.
but that's a chicken or egg problem, right? So you cannot get results without confidence. You cannot get confidence without results. It's becoming a problem. But the only other way I tell my students is like by doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
Like the only way you can gain that confidence is if you feel good about yourself,
Yeah.
right? And that only comes with some action. Somewhere you say, oh, I've done this. I worked hard. So you can kind of substitute the confidence that is lacking from the results from your work.
Yeah.
Nothing else that I mean, I could think of. So, but yeah, but typically these are the things that I've spent a lot of time, for myself and as a coach talking about and discussing. But it's very useful. Like even if a lot of times we think that psychological things that you need to have one eureka moment, right? It's not like that actually.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
it's
so
like bits and
right.
pieces that you gather as you go. Yeah.
I think it's just a journey of self-awareness as you keep on accumulating those concepts instead of just one fine day. Like you said, it's not a eureka moment where like, okay, now my mindset is awesome. Now I don't need anything else. So it's more so accumulated with time. And the part where you said where confidence is built upon through work and effort, that's the competence side of things. And we often discuss this in our sessions where you're so right. Like, oftentimes, the results are not always guaranteed. It's the reality. As much as we'd like to work towards it, we cannot always guarantee the result, but we can 100% focus on what it is in our control, which comes down to the competence point of view. So, yeah, I think that's fantastic. And since we were on that topic, that would be my next question, that as you work with chess players from a coach perspective, apart from the areas of confidence or the fear of higher rated players, what are some other common psychological obstacles that you have noticed in the people you work with?
Uh, rating, I mean, gain or loss of rating, winning or losing games in the sense. Sometimes, of course, also there is pressure from the family or peer pressure, right? Like sometimes the pressure is self-built.
Hmm.
Some particularly with kids who are really, really talented. After
Yeah.
a point, you see that accumulating because they now feel like they need to deliver. So I would say most of them are around, like you pointed out beautifully, external factors,
Yeah.
right? I mean, and when they realize that it's external factor and that's not within their control, they can automatically fix that. But
Yeah.
the maturity is not there. These are young kids, right? It's going to take time for them to understand that. But yeah, I would say a lot of that is that, I mean, having this rating fear and fear of loss is probably the biggest I notice.
Yeah.
Because when someone sits down to play the game and their opponent is like 300 points above the game about them, half the battle is lost
Yeah.
right there because they have already conceded that their opponent is a better player in their mind, and that really takes away the big fight.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the loss. I mean, I get multiple times calls from students in the middle of the tournament wanting to withdraw,
Hmm.
right? Because they have lost a game, and of course we are like completely against it in the sense, like, against in the sense the Indian school of thought. Like I've never grown up withdrawing from a tournament,
Yeah.
and it's not a thing that we have known, right? So
100%.
I would always talk to my students, but like it doesn't matter if you win or lose. The fact that if you're able to stay and play is already a big success in itself,
Yes.
right? The rating might you might lose extra 20 points if you lose the last game or 30 points. Doesn't really matter. But in the like the bigger scheme of things, it really, really helps, right? But that fear, I would
Yeah.
say, is probably the biggest factor that, that's like, I mean, it's there for all of us, right? Today, if I go, I mean, I still play occasionally and I still have that. And I still like to play to some extent, unlike other coaches. Like I said, most of my friends and, other coaches have retired. They don't
Yeah.
play. I'm still playing, but my rating is, of course, taking a dive. But it's interesting to me when I actually think about those problems because when I sit down on that board and I am trying to battle some of these thoughts, it to me it keeps me closer to my students in the games because I know it's very relevant. Even if after all of these years of experience
Hmm.
and all of this teaching, when I sit down on that board, I cannot execute all of it. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the curiosity and the point of view that you're bringing to this conversation, specifically this topic, because it is so different when, you're, like you said, functioning as a coach. And then when you go and sit on the board, it's like, oh, there's this to consider, there's that to consider. And then comes the psychology part. And I really appreciate you sharing that even now, when you sit at the board, the fear aspect still exists in some capacity. And that tells us a lot about, many times we think that, oh, I should be completely fearless. What we usually talk about in sports psychology is what if you coexist with it? Like, it can be there, but then so are other aspects, such as, the confidence or the discipline or the consistency, motivation. We call it, expansion of awareness so that you coexist with it. And then it doesn't seem so daunting because now you are so many more things in addition to that. And, that changes
Makes a
the
lot of sense. Yeah.
perspective. Yeah, it changes the perspective quite a bit. But like you mentioned about, the thought that comes that in chess players' mindset that okay, if I'm playing against a high rated player or a titled player, they oftentimes lose even before they've sat at the board. Do you think that has changed with time, or was it like always there, even when you were actively playing, or because of, the exposure that chess as a sport has gotten? Has it amplified with time?
I didn't feel, or at least at this point, I don't feel so much on that area.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I can kind of identify personalities.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you come across students who are either working hard or like really out of the world confidence, right? They will stand out. But the remaining group are always like that. I mean, the best example I tell my students is when I sit down to play a game against, let's say, a 2000 or 21 in a tournament,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times I can tell I'm going to win the game right
Yeah.
there, right? I'm not worried. I'm not scared. There occasionally will come a 2100
Mm-hmm.
who I know is not afraid of me, right? And I know that even before the game is ended, I'm not even in the middle of the game or at any point, right?
Yeah.
I'm always getting this feeling this from this player that
Mm-hmm.
they are not afraid of me. They're going to be, they want to beat me,
Mm.
right? Now, whether they have the skill to beat me or not is irrelevant, but at least they can see that they have the belief to beat me. And that's actually very rare, though.
Yeah.
I feel like over the years, it's not very common. And
Mm.
usually those players quickly move up because that's a big kind of a telltale sign to say that okay they actually now I mean of course they need to build their skill to work on it, but
Yeah.
they usually move up fast and they're able to do that. So I think that has not changed in my opinion over the years. I've seen this when I was younger and other things too, because it's more like you pointed out, it's there even
Yeah.
today. If I sit down and if I play at 2650 now, right? I mean I already feel like I'm inferior,
Yeah.
right? So no matter how much I tell myself, listen, I can do this, I can play this, or but this at the start of the game,
Mm.
I do feel like I'm in. So it's a fight between being practical,
Yeah.
where I accept, okay, I'm a coach, I am this, I'm not studying, or this is what my level is, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a practical, realistic approach of it, which is fair.
Mm.
But also the approach where I cannot say, hey, I can beat this player,
Yeah.
right? You want that confidence too. So it's somewhere a balance there that is required, yeah.
Yeah, I think you in a way answered my next question, but I still want to like talk about it and expand, which is, if you had to assign on a scale of like if you have 100 points out of those, how much will you assign to technical chess knowledge? And then how much will you assign to the mindset or the mental side of things? Because you did mention that many times you can realize that oh, this person who is lower rated has already lost the game in his mind somehow. So yeah, what do you think about that?
That's interesting. I've never thought about it that way. I don't know. Maybe it's like a 50-50. I would say. I mean, I do value psychological aspects quite a bit because,
Yeah.
I mean, there is a very, I mean, with a lot of my students, I see this. There is this placebo
Yeah.
on them, right? Like if they believe and they're playing actually bad game and they come back and tell me I played this wonderful coach game, Coach Magesh, I want to show this to you, and then they
Uh-huh.
beat this player and I look at the game and I'm like, okay. um, but so I can see that, right?
Right.
And I also know this very much from my personal experience because I
Mm.
was always a player like this, and my friends used to joke about this when I was younger because I always thought I was winning no matter what the position was. I would be completely lost. I would still be thinking, hey, if I do this particular thing, I can still win, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I would not be thinking I can make a draw. My
Hmm.
my interest was always like either I'm already winning or I still have a chance to win here. So that played a huge part in how the results came about.
Yeah,
So obviously you cannot do much without the skill. You need the skills,
yeah,
right? So I don't think you can really substitute the skills.
for sure.
But but what does happen, I feel, is that like you said earlier, the projection.
Mm.
When you walk in with a certain level of confidence, you can actually get away with some things.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think body language is also such a big part in that, right? How you present yourself. So on some days, you might actually not be feeling the 100% version of you, but how can you then also have that control over not just what's going on in your mind, but also how it's presenting to the person in front of you? Because clearly, even from, our conversation, your observations, there must be many grandmasters and chess players like you who do observe these things that, hey, my opponent is not showing up as confidently as, other people
Absolutely,
do.
we're always doing that. I mean, it's an over the board game. When you sit across from someone, the body language, like you said, it matters. It changes everything, right? If I'm when I'm playing a lower rated player, I can already tell. Like I told you, most of the times I can tell that okay, do I have any danger in this game?
Yeah,
Maybe I might not win the game. Maybe I might make a draw. But with only a few players who are not as high rate like in my rating, that I will actually feel like wait, I got to watch out with this
yeah,
kid or with this player.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Actually, I have a, curious question for you, and I would love to know your perspective on that because this is one of the discussion that we often have when players are struggling a little with confidence or even other areas of, their mental skills. When we look at the journey of a chess player in terms of their mindset, I like to use the metaphor of a building. So, of course, every building has a foundation, and then there are like everything else that's constructed upon that. The foundation, in fact, is the passion or the love for the game upon which all these other skills are built. Do you think that in the process of progressing, they oftentimes forget what their foundation is, which might be causing the shifts in the like, higher levels as they're going?
Absolutely, yeah. I think like you said, perspective shifts, right? Sometimes when you're deep into something, you forget what you're in it for, right?
Yeah,
Happens a lot if you're, like you said, this foundation is always passion and like the interest in playing because after a point you cannot push something if that is not there, right?
yeah,
I mean, so yeah, I think that's a very important thing that I do observe
yeah.
because a lot of times these kids who love chess and play suddenly they walk into the tournament and they freeze. So it's not absolutely necessary, but the tournament and the results and the rating and all these things suddenly come in and then it becomes a big package rather
Mm,
than just go play chess for fun. So yeah, I think it's very hard to remote practically speaking, but that's essentially a good goal, right? If you
mm.
imagine if I can play every single game like a casual game of chess that I loved when I was 8 years old,
Yeah.
right? Would be the most ideal scenario, but it's it's not easy.
It's definitely not easy. And I think that's why sports psychology is often so much, like I said, about self-awareness, because that allows you to look at things from a very objective lens. Not that it's happening to you, but almost as if you're observing you experiencing that. So, outer body experience, almost like that. But it's definitely not easy. But then when you do that internal work, I think you come to that stage where you can oftentimes navigate between those perspectives at your convenience, which is a great place to be in. What do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I would love to be in that place.
Definitely. But, one question I had also for you in this regard was when chess players are going through the motion of a tournament, especially, how does their psychology or the aspects that you think they focus on differ than when they are in training? How does that shift also happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, one of my students recently said this to me. He said, "Coach, I understand every single thing that you tell me. I everything makes sense, but the minute I'm actually playing the game, I forget."
Yeah.
Right? He's like, "I'm just playing." So, I mean, it's natural though, right? So, what usually my understanding and explanation out of this would be that it's a lot of this is muscle memory and what you have done over the years,
Hmm.
right? I cannot change some of the very the atomic parts of what how I play chess at this point at this age. I cannot do that, right?
Yeah.
And if I want to do that, it's that much amount of effort.
Yeah.
So with my students, what I talk about here is that there is a lot of training that needs to happen
Mm.
for you to be able to kind of reproduce that in a tournament game.
Right.
So that's the essential difference, right? Because when you go into the tournament play,
Hmm.
there's a set of things that's going to kick in
Yeah.
because you're playing years of like hundreds and thousands of games that you've played in tournaments, and over the years you've built some system,
Yeah.
and that's going to kick in. That's not like the system one and system two stuff, right? So it's not really going to you're not going to be able to analyze each and every aspect of it, particularly as the time goes down
Yeah.
the automatic systems kick in, right? So you don't really think about those things. So essentially, the training has to focus on that,
Yeah.
which is what actually I feel like is a big thing that's lacking in today's training sessions.
Hmm.
I feel like too much training happens in a generic way.
Yeah.
You go and study tactics, you go and play, do some stuff. This is not, that's. improving your skill level, yes,
Hmm.
but it's not actually a specific targeted training. If you are going to the game and you're always afraid in time trouble and you're losing, or if you're making blunders in a certain way, or if you're doing something, you need to train for that.
Yeah.
In my opinion, the only thing you cannot train for is to really get a certain level of tournament pressure.
Mm.
You cannot artificially create that in a practice game,
Right.
right? Like, or a championship. If you're going there, if you're going to about to win the national championship or a world championship, and you have to
Yeah.
make a move or find some decisions, that only comes with experience. Yeah,
For
you
sure.
there is no way you can put yourself in that scenario.
Yeah.
Maybe you can do some mental exercises where you might have something to imagine that. I don't know,
Yeah.
but so with my students, at least that's what I tell them. Like, that's the only thing you cannot recreate. That'll come
Yeah.
with experience. You will do it. Everything else you can, right? You can sit down and say, I want to train for this, I want to do this, but then the training has to be focused.
Yeah.
I actually, I'm a big tennis fan, and Rafa has a great interview once he was talking about, and there's one line that he said always stayed with me. So he said, like, he never entered a training session without a goal.
That's
So
amazing.
he would walk into a training session and he had something that he needed to improve in the training session that he would
Yeah.
focus on, right? It's not that you're training, you're actually paying attention, like, from your head to say, this
Correct.
is what I'm training for, and I want to focus on, I want to see that result
Yeah.
improving,
Yeah.
right? So I tell this to my students a lot, right? Because this I do see as a big gap in training.
Yeah.
Majority of my students go in, they train, they work hard, they do a lot of things, but then they don't connect the dots.
Yeah.
They don't apply why they're training. Yeah.
I think that's fantastic. First of all, I just want to take in everything you've said right now because there's so many components of, psychology that also tie so well into what you just said. First, but before I get into all of that, are you a Rafael Nadal fan?
Yeah, well, I'm a big Federer fan, but
Oh,
I'm a tennis fan, so Rafa is great. I'm a huge Federer fan.
okay. So we may find each other on opposing sides because I'm a big
Oh,
Rafael
I
Nadal
have a
fan.
lot of Federer quotes that I talk to my students about too. But Rafa in training, this is unbeatable. I just, yeah.
Yeah. No, but I love tennis references. That's why I felt the need to ask that. But
Mhm.
yeah, building upon what you said, it's called like intentional effort, right? It's almost like signposting your brain, hey, I'm about to do this. This is the outcome I'm going for. So when you're going through the motion, learn that that part is what we are reinforcing in a way. It's a very small 10 seconds to at best 1 minute thing that you tell yourself, but it makes such a huge difference because like you largely said, right? It's a muscle memory. It's encoding information. And when you encode it in a specific part of your brain with intention, it really does register like that. And you're 100% right. We often think that, the brain is very different than the other muscles of our body. Sure, in a capacity, it also has its own power to think. But when it comes to our sport, which is largely mental, the brain is a muscle. And the more you train it, for example, if a person's going into the gym, they're not going to think that, oh, if I want to squat, I will first sit like this and then it just happens naturally. So even
Exactly.
for chess, it's the exact same way, which is why I love the example that you gave right now.
Yeah, I give this in the tennis. I also give the same example. Which, I mean, I know my students a lot with tennis references, but like, the questions that you're not thinking about how do I lift my hand, how do I turn my hand to play a forehand
Correct.
in a big tennis match, right?
Yeah.
But my students are still doing that. They're like, oh, how do I calculate? What do I do for candidate moves? I mean, like, this is foundation level, right? You
Yes.
got to work on the foundation level, and you have to get that to a point of muscle memory,
Yeah.
right? But for that, I like what you were saying. What is the terminology you were saying that you have to intentionally train on that?
Yeah. Intentional effort, signposting
Intentional
your
effort.
brain.
Nice. Yeah, that's what is lacking for sure.
Yeah. Actually, as you were mentioning, have you read the book, The Inner Game of Tennis?
No, not.
It's actually exactly what you mentioned that you don't tell your conscious brain, that now that I'm about to hit a forehand, this is how I'm supposed to, move my hand to do it. Research has shown that when you actually do that, it leads to tightening of the hand and actually you misplaying that shot. So
Oh,
the book
interesting.
is written by Timothy Galway, and he's, a really renowned person in this field. I think since you also love tennis, you'll
Oh,
really love this
absolutely. I
book.
will. Inner game of tennis, yeah? I'll
Yes.
definitely check it
So
out.
they use tennis as a metaphor to talk about sports psychology. So, that can also benefit chess players, but just because you're also a tennis lover. Yeah.
Absolutely.
That also brings me to one question. What do you think about intuition and how that plays a part?
Well, I think intuition is built over the years with practice. Yeah,
Yeah,
you cannot have intuition on something that you don't know about. I mean, it comes with knowledge, of course,
yeah,
and I think it's important, of course, very very important. And I think in a lot of sense, majority of chess is played with intuition.
yeah,
So it's very important, right? And maybe so any given game, for example, you might have four or five critical points
yeah,
where you're spending a lot of time calculating too much in depth and all those things. But
mm,
the rest of the game mostly is intuition, right?
yeah,
Because even calculating in depth is intuition, so which is something sometimes is missed. So I try to separate this with my students, and I talk about it. Is that one is to actually say, I'm calculating. This is the answer, right?
yeah,
I'm going in here. I'm looking at this move and calculate. But even before that, there's a step to say, I want to calculate this move,
yeah,
right? And that's real intuition, right?
yeah,
Because there is unlimited number of moves for you in front of you. You have so many moves that you can think about.
yeah,
In a practical game, if you pick the wrong move, that means you spend 10 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever that amount, right? Every wrong move you picked, that's
hmm,
it. Your chance of getting the right move is gone, right? In fact, I would say in a critical point, if you picked one wrong move, that's already gone
yeah,
because you cannot spend 10 minutes in every move to eliminate it and come back to the right move, right?
right,
Even if you're good at calculating and figuring it out. So the intuition starts right there to say, in this position, I see these many moves, this is the one I'm going to even spend my time on,
yeah,
and that already has a huge weightage on it. So I think yeah, it's something that players have to build. The only way to build it, like I said, is through knowledge. You have to see
yes,
games, you have to kind of gather general information about things. Otherwise you cannot have that good intuition, and that's also a challenge in today's generation, I feel, because if you have to just see chess for the sake of seeing chess and just having fun, you would build intuition well,
correct.
right? But a lot of times training is sometimes, oh, you know what, I'm just going to go do this opening course or something, or I'm doing this tactics. And so if you want to build intuition, you have to see games.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You're so right. And it's like a reference to the way our memory is stored, right? Because when you think about the mind, it's the conscious mind, subconscious mind, unconscious mind. And of course, like even if I was to ask you that, sir, when you were 10 years old, do you remember the positions you saw? You'd be like, Saloni, are you crazy? Of course, I don't remember that. But it's stored somewhere. It doesn't go away. The patterns that you learned since a young age, the knowledge that you work upon throughout the years, they're stored somewhere. So the brain stores all of that largely in the unconscious mind because the conscious mind needs the working capacity to work in real time.
mm.
Intuition is actually borrowed from that knowledge from the unconscious mind,
Gosh,
which is
interesting.
why we immediately don't have an explanation as to why do I feel like this move might be correct. And
Makes sense.
then people feel like, oh, but how do I trust it? Then we discuss how chess engines, they're built on neural networks, right? That's the way that chess engines work. It's like a branch, how it goes in all directions and then it narrows down again. Neural networks are actually built upon neural connections that our
Correct.
mind has. So if you're so confident in trusting what the engine is giving you as an output, how come you don't trust yourself, the very map on which the engine is built? So, this perspective, I actually love talking about intuition because it matters more than people think, especially when you put in effort.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's nice. I guess when you were mentioning that there was a movie about how somebody takes a tablet and taps into the unconscious mind and all, right? I forget
Yeah, yeah.
something.
I actually
Bradley
don't
Cooper's
remember.
movie, I think.
I don't remember, but I'll look into
Yeah.
that. That might be a good reference for people to talk about.
But yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think intuition makes a big impact. One thing that came to my mind when you were talking about this, like when my student with my students, I have two extremes, and in a lot of things, I tell them in a funny way that when I see them going in one extreme, I'm actually going to the other extreme. So I'm
Yeah.
usually pulling them this way or that way to find them in the middle, right? So, for example, if somebody is not trusting their intuition and
Hmm.
instinct enough, I'm usually telling them just trust your intuition and play it, right?
Yeah.
And occasionally I'll find this super overconfident player. So I'll tell them you should have more self-doubt, you should
Yeah.
not believe everything that you just.
Yeah.
So you can catch myself saying completely contradicting statements. So
That's so interesting. I'm curious, what makes you do that?
because I think it's the balance that's more important, right?
Mm.
Because it's not so all these ideas have very good value
Yeah.
unless I mean until the point you overuse it or overemphasize it, right? And like you started beautifully by saying that there is no one solution for anyone.
Yeah.
It's always a trial and error.
Yeah.
and to see what works for whom and what is. So in several cases, I've seen that, giving them the confidence was more required. So to tell them, listen, you need to trust your intuition, you need to play this, you need to, most of the time you're doing it. It's okay if some things go wrong, right?
Mm.
And the same thing has actually applied the other way for some students, for me to say, listen, you should have some reality check and self-doubt, right? You should not always be blind to the idea that, oh, I saw this, I'm winning. I see this, I'm winning, right? So in some cases, this applies more and that. But if you just remove my sentence out of context, I'm
Yeah.
directly contradicting myself. So,
Yeah, no, but I think what you said is so, so important because it is true that there needs to be that balanced aspect of viewing things no matter where you are. Not just for chess, but I think even in life, too much
absolutely.
of anything can be dangerous. So having that rational perspective, no matter how much you're passionate about something or are into it, I think that's so, so important. So I'm happy your students must be benefiting a lot from that perspective that
Well,
you
I don't
can
know how much they're benefiting. Only if they follow it. I know that they're benefiting, but
yeah.
I do pass this information along. So yeah.
No, but thank you for that. And, I also want to respect your time. So I have one last question for you that as a coach, what would you like to know or are curious about sports psychology more, such that the chess parents, the coaches, or even other, just chess players in general who are viewing this might benefit? What do you think you would like to know more, or chess as a whole could benefit from sports psychology training?
I don't have one specific thing. In general, I'm very much interested in psychology. I'm very much interested in, of course, chess and psychology. They kind of, gel well, of course. I mean, but for a matter of fact, any sport, if you
Mm-hmm.
play that, of course, this plays a huge role, right? Um, I've so these days my thought is more about practices and techniques that I have practical value.
Mm-hmm.
Because from my perspective, when I'm talking to students and I'm teaching classes or when I'm playing myself, I feel like the understanding, at least for myself, is not too bad. I feel like I'm able to spot what's going on with
Right.
my students. I'm able to, but the area in which I'm not an expert,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like is more challenging is to what are the techniques that can actually help them grow out of these things, right? Which is where, of course, experts like you guys come in and you can help a lot. And I feel like my students can gain a lot of value from these things
Yeah.
because a lot of this is repetitive, right? They go through this, they know
Yeah.
this. And the classic example I gave you is a student telling me, Coach, I completely understood what you're saying. I forget when I go to the game, right?
Yeah.
This is like a very simple situation for pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
We all have this, right? Okay, there are some students who are stuck at even the point of understanding what's going on, right?
Yes.
That's actually the first step to actually sit and critically think about your game and critically thinking about the tournament and understanding what actually happened. That's the first step,
Right.
right? But once you understand, to go to the next step, what tools and techniques can they use to work and stuff like that, right? I think that's where your expertise comes in, and I think it'll be a great value. So, in frankly, in terms of curiosity, that's what I would love to see. Like maybe a session where
Yeah.
you're working with someone on how to overcome some of those things, what kind of tools that they're working on. That's what I would love to see and understand. Oh, this is how they can help themselves.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for asking that. At the top of my mind, of course, I do have a couple of answers, but again, psychology is so subjective. So what works for one might not always in the exact same way work for other, which is why, we also at Mind Over Moves, we have group sessions where we work more so on the common psychological challenges that chess players might face. And then we also have individual consulting where we go deeper into each person's psychology. But as we were discussing that, attention cues is the concept that we really work on a lot in order to retrieve the information. Like you said, I understand everything in training, but how do I remember that when it matters the most? So we talk about how you can use common objects that you always carry at a tournament. This can be your pen. This can be, maybe you carry like, many Indian players carry a photo of the idol or something like that. Your water bottle, or just something that will always exist in your chess playing environment. You associate a meaning with that that is not directly its actual. So if you see a pen, it's not just a pen, it's a reminder for you to think XYZ. It matters more than people think. So, for example, for time pressure, this is one thing that we do that, they know that when they are going to go in time pressure, it bothers them a lot. But when they're in it, they don't understand how to manage it. So, what we do is the clock will always be there no matter where you're playing. So, they set if 5 minutes is considered as time pressure for them, at the 10-minute mark, they again signpost their brain that, hey, you're about to enter. So, just be aware. That awareness in itself brings about a lot of calmness because now they're not suddenly finding themselves in it. So that was just what I was thinking.
That's
What are
very
your
nice. Yeah,
thoughts?
that's, I mean, a very nice point. Awareness changes a lot, which
Yeah.
is fact, right? There is no sudden feeling of it. Yeah, see, that's already very interesting to me to hear that. Nice.
Yeah, of course. No, I'm very, very, grateful that you took time to have this conversation with us today. I'm sure everything that you said, suggested, and your approach to coaching, those who are watching will benefit a lot. So thank you so much, Grandmaster
No
Magesh.
problem. Thank you. Thank you.
Of
Hoping to
course.
work more in the future with my students and with this. Yeah.
Of course, thank you so much. To all those watching, thank you so much for, joining in Tuesday Talks with Saloni once more, and I'll see you again next week.